This is Raji, an ancient epic. It kind of reminds me. So I've played a demo of it before. I haven't actually started the proper game. I think it reminded me a little bit of God of War, but it's definitely got a little bit more of sort of a positive, hopeful vibe than God of War, and it's set in, I believe, Indian culture. I could be wrong about any of those things because it's been a very long time since I played the demo. But before I get started, I actually just got a couple of questions in the chat that I want to answer. So first off, Awesome Twitch Dude asks, do you ever play multiplayer games and slay noobs? So I occasionally play multiplayer games. Usually, basically, I just limit myself to Call of Duty because that's it's sort of the shooter that's most on my wavelength, and so I can actually play it pretty well. I definitely I can't hold my own against like pro level players, but when a Call of Duty game is new and it's mostly full of excited noobs, I can do okay for a while until people start getting real good at it, and then I usually sort of back away and do something else for a while. But that's the only game I do that with. Occasionally, I think when Respawn comes out with a new game, I usually play one of their games for a while too. So like a Titanfall or a Apex Legends. I can get into those too, mostly just because the folks who started Call of Duty and then moved on to Respawn, they've just kind of got my wavelength. It's like the way that I expect a shooter to control in my hands, they understand it. It's like they're just on the same plane as me, and so I like their games, and I don't really get into anybody else's to the same degree. But that's fine. Like I don't, multiplayer. Getting good at a multiplayer game takes so much time and effort. And my whole approach to games is I like to play a huge variety of them, and so I can't really get good at a multiplayer game. I can't afford to, and so I just kind of pick the one. And every year I get into the new Call of Duty, and I do my best for a while, and then I, eventually fade away. Greeting Scar also asked, by the way, do your coworkers benefit from these streams or videos? Occasionally, if there's a game people at work are asking about, and I've done a stream of that video, I'll share my stream. So if they're curious about it, they can, watch it on my stream and learn the same things that I learned from it. But I don't, I get the main benefit that they might get though is that I feel like I do my job better because I do these streams, and so they probably get this sort of like fringe benefit of me doing the streams. I don't usually hype them around the office that much just because it feels weirdly self-aggrandizing to just constantly share videos of myself talking to a screen, so I don't do it that often. So I don't think they benefit from them directly all that much, but hopefully, they make me better, and that's what'll end up mattering. Okay, questions answered. Oh, and also, Josh Annalise, thanks for joining us in the chat. For a while, I had nobody watching me on YouTube, so glad to have you in there. Anyway, let's get into Raji.
This is the heart of our story. Golu and Raji, brother and sister.
Ooh, sorry. I think the volume might be just a little bit loud. I'm going to take it down slightly.
And this was their whole world. This one small carnival. The other performers were their friends, their only family. This was home. On that day before their performance, Raji took her brother aside. "Did you forget, little brother?" she asked him. And she tied a rakhi to his hand, for it was the feast of Raksha Bandhan. Although it was a feast day, they still had coins to earn. So Raji walked on tight ropes and tumbled for the crowd. While Golu told his puppet tales of ancient times when demons walked the lands. A long, long time ago, a demon did penance. For showing such devotion, Brahma blessed him with immortality and a mighty weapon of all. Upon receiving, He united the demons to wage a war. Bhumi Devi urged him to stop. He killed her, ruthlessly without thought.
Don't give demons weapons.
This angered Shiva greatly, and he stomped, dividing the continents. And the demons were forever lost. But as he spoke, the skies darkened, and the earth shook. And other figures dressed as demons strode through the crowd. These were not masks. This was not a child's tale. As the demons turned to slaughter, Raji tried to reach her brother. He'd been hurt, and he was scared, and she knew she must protect him. But in that moment, Raji failed, for the Garasura demons took Golu from her. Raji, awake, my child.
Oh, am I doing something? Oh, no. Okay. All right, I'm going to turn the game volume down a little bit now that the cutscene is over, and I'm going to want to be talking about stuff. So one thing I really, really love about sort of the modern entertainment industry is the fact that there is so much more room these days for sort of like cultural sharing, or I don't know how else I want to describe it. Like one of my favorite things about watching Netflix right now is the fact that Netflix has explicitly gone out to a lot of different countries and funded local television shows and local movies, and then brought all of that stuff, all of those programs into the shared sort of Netflix universe. So it's like, so I can watch TV shows from Spain and from Brazil and from Russia and from just all these different places, tons of anime. I can watch all of this stuff and sort of get this much broader universal exposure to things. And similarly, the indie games industry, it's got a similar thing going on. It's not one big monolithic corporation going out there and trying to get all of this sort of exposure from different places all over the world, but there are like Never Alone, the way it explored Alaskan culture, this like Raji here, with setting a sort of God of War style game inside Indian culture, and you can sort of look around the indie games industry and see how Nowhere Prophet is another sort of like Indian focused game that I played recently. I love the fact that there's sort of the right match of like funding and interest among the audience to make these games happen. And I feel like sort of it broadens my horizons a lot, not to just have the same games made by the same people from the same culture all the time, and just sort of getting this homogeneity that you kind of expected from previous generations of the entertainment industry. Here, I feel like I'm getting a much broader view of the world, and I feel like we're only just starting. It's like we started to break down some of those barriers, but they're still just barely cracking. I would love to see what's possible in the future, as far as seeing games from far distant cultures that I almost never get any exposure to. I love the way the character sort of emotes as she's walking around here, just looking like, confused. I like it when you're sort of controlling a character and they're not just using the normal, like right now, I'm doing my normal run cycle. But while I was first waking up, my character kept looking around, and I felt like, sort of like I was acting out those emotions myself.
So young.
A child. Remember Shiva's words.
It is so much weight to put on the shoulders of a mortal. Is this one strong enough?
Time will tell.
So you can see why this game reminds me of God of War, because the camera is very distant from the character. It's on a track. As I'm moving through the level, something in the level is tracking my location and moving the camera smoothly along with my character. This is actually the problem of trying to track a character with a scripted camera is one of my favorite problems to solve in like third-person brawlers, and it's kind of too bad that this genre has kind of fallen out of favor. I mean, games like God of War used to be kind of a go-to. Like when the Lord of the Rings movies first came out. The games that they based on those were in this genre. The Aragon game was in this genre. There was a Conan game that I really loved that was in this genre, and it's really interesting to try to solve the problem. Like if the player can move on a two-dimensional plane, and they can backtrack and they can go around corners and they can do all this crazy stuff, coming up with a system that sort of has a camera move smoothly and cinematically following the player when they have freedom, a certain amount of freedom of movement, it's a harder problem to solve than you might think, and it's a really interesting problem to solve because it's like there's lots of weird little edge cases and a lot of geometry to it that makes it really fun and interesting, and I wish I had more opportunities to solve it, but I'm working in a genre, the open world genre, completely inappropriate for this kind of thing. So right now, this is the ceremonial get farted on by bulls platform. So I probably want to avoid that one. Oh, hello. These environments are gorgeous, by the way. I hope you can hear the dialogue okay. Because this game... because it pauses whenever I shift away to mess with OBS, I don't want to be raising and lowering the volume constantly, so I'm hoping you can, when people talk in these cutscenes, I hope you can hear them well enough. Let me know if you can't, and I can raise the volume.
Her brother and the other children had been seized by the Gadasura. I told her that she must be strong. Her journey would be difficult and full of unknowns. I blessed her with the Trishul, my most powerful weapon that Shiva had given to me. This, with Raji's own serenity and strength, would save her brother.
So I'm not actually sure who Durga is. Because it seems like... So Durga clearly got this weapon from Shiva, which means... I imagine Durga's not as powerful as Shiva, but Durga definitely seems to be some kind of godlike entity. Kind of reminds me, at least, for me, as someone who does not know very much about Hindu culture, I hesitate to say anything about it because I don't know anything about it, aside from what I'm picking up from this game. So, your hero getting your interesting weapon. Classic moment in any brawler. Okay, so I've got this weapon. I can't do anything with it yet. Also can't jump yet. Oh, now I can.
She has no serenity. Her heart rules her head.
She walks boldly into a dark cave. She leaps chasms. She stands fearless before a goddess.
These little tutorial shadows telling me what to do are kind of neat. So I'm not sure what I just got
There is
out of
fire
that.
in the wood. Yes, it must be tempered. But without that fire, she would have already given up.
Oh, yeah, so...
Mortals would not be brave enough to climb.
Our Raji has no fear of heights. Watch.
This reminds me a lot of Prince of Persia, actually. And, games like Prince of Persia are interesting because, clearly that's another game that's set in another culture. But Prince of Persia was made by Americans, sort of inspired by, sort of the American perspective on Persian culture. I don't get the sense that it's actually, it's not a representation of a game, like it's not a game made by Persian people. And I get the sense that a game like, like Never Alone or Raji is much more of like an authentic, like someone making a game that represents them. I don't know if that's true. I don't actually know if the Raji team is from India or has a connection to India.
There,
But
see, she is learning to think and to use the skills of her childhood.
but
It is one thing to climb a pole,
sorry, I don't want to talk while they're talking.
quite another to face a demon.
But I get the vibe that this is like a labor of love for someone. And so that's what makes me think that it's probably a bit more authentic than, your typical sort of game made by Americans
To save her brother, Raji must face the demons.
set in a far-flung land.
She held the Trishul, and it was a gift of great power. It was blessed by Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and would help her stand against her terrible foe. But it was also a great responsibility. To wield it, she would need strength, courage, and belief.
Hello? Rescue the children.
Any of you see my brother? The other guard. Go, now.
Where are those kids going to end up? Oh, they made a hole for the children. Cool. It is so easy to just, sort of take the easy way out and have characters you rescue just vanish into thin air. I mentioned earlier in a previous video that I worked on Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku, and in that game we had similar cage rescues like this. Only what we did was we cut to a camera angle and had the characters that you rescue run just barely off camera and then winked them out of existence. And so when you got your normal camera back, there were no characters around, and whatever, we just solved it cinematically. They actually made a hole for these children to disappear into, which is interesting. So yeah, so this game has got a little bit, not only of God of War, but Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in there too. Okay, so I can go up here, or I can go up those other stairs. I can't decide which one. I hate when a game sort of provides you with multiple branching paths, and you can't tell which path is important and which one is the side path. This one certainly looks like it's going somewhere really interesting. So yeah, let's try the other one first, because I always want to see everything that a game has to offer, and the way to do that is to visit each side route first, and before taking the main route.
Where are you taking him?
Poor child.
Oh,
Will find a way.
okay, I can't go this way. Well, good to know. That certainly makes things easier. Hey there, High Computing. So, one thing, since I'm on these stairs, Greeting Scar mentioned, I'll just quote them. The stairs ascending/descending animation is non-existent, but the level designer used a bunch of stairs. Bummer. Yeah, so, I mean, I think if you're trying to represent this kind of architecture and you can't get away from stairs, and unfortunately, getting a character to look and especially feel good going up and down stairs is actually one of the hardest problems in that part of game development, in character movement, because going up and down stairs is a very different it's an extremely different kind of movement from running around on a flat surface or even an inclined surface, because you have to like take these discrete steps going down the stairs, and ladders are also really hard to make look good. You'll notice that a lot of games, when you're climbing a ladder, they'll have the character hold the sides of the ladder, not the rungs, and that's just because getting a character to line up on the rungs and look like they're really gripping them it's extremely hard to get it right consistently. And so, a lot of times what they'll try to do is not show your feet and get your hands on the sides, and then it's a lot easier. And similarly, like trying to get a character to look like they're really climbing steps is really, really, really hard, especially just because, when you're going up and down stairs, just the way that you plant your feet is just completely different. You've got so much leeway when you're running around on a flat surface, but when you're going up and down stairs, it's just the character has to be so much more precise to look accurate. And whenever you're trying to make a character really precise and have their feet land exactly where they need to, the cost you pay for that is they can't move as freely based on your input. So like if I just, I'm moving this character around on the flat surface, she can move exactly where I tell her to move, and it feels pretty natural. Now her feet are actually still sliding a little bit, but it's pretty subtle, and it's and the game is optimizing for my sense of freedom as I'm moving around, my sense of just immediate responsiveness. And on stairs, you have to sacrifice some of that to make the feet look right. And so most games, they could spend ages getting the stairs to look right, and then it would be at the cost of the feel of the gameplay. And so a lot of times they just, like, why spend so much effort trying to get the stairs to look good when you're actually also you're not just paying a resource cost to get it done, to get the work done, you're also paying a cost of the player not feeling right when they're moving around on the stairs. Unless you have like truly next gen, IK stuff, it's often not worth it.
Feel your heart quicken, the strength flow through you. Fight, Raji. Be the warrior.
Okay, so I'm actually going to hit something for the first time. Okay, so they have these things standing further away because when I use the Y button, I travel much further. Whoa. Okay. Ah. Oh, here's an actual monster. Oh, did it hit me? Okay, so this is actually a pretty good lesson because it feels like the dodging and the Y button.
Now she will bring an end to him.
The dodge and the the dodge and the Y button are really well paired with each other.
And the Trishul is a most versatile weapon.
Okay, Durga, yes, I love your weapon. Anyway, so we've got sort of your standard attack, which is great for when you're close range. And then when an enemy attacks you, you want to dodge away and then come back with a Y to cover the same distance as the dodge and attack at the end of it. So, yeah, that works really well. Okay, so left trigger and then X. Whoa, lets me throw stuff. That's cool. Oh, and then A plus X together, huh? Oh wait, is it saying A plus X like I'm chording the buttons? Or just that I'm... Oh, okay, I'm just dodging in between attacks is all it's asking me to do. I guess? Okay, seems like it's good that I've got these guys on about the same pattern. Okay, good. And I can interrupt this guy when he's attacking me. Early enemies in a game like this often do, like, they let you just, when you're wailing on them, you can interrupt their attacks and they can't do damage to you. But you usually, in a game like this, start getting to enemies who at least have attacks that can't be interrupted, and then you have to dodge them. Ah. There we go. So you can tell this game is definitely is very inspired by God of War, because it's got those B buttons that appear over enemies that are ready to die. It's got all these, it's got your very sort of dodgy combat, very sort of like responsive combat. And it's also got a bit of Prince of Persia in the navigation.
She's a circus performer, our Raji. See what she can do.
But and it's very easy when you play a game and you can immediately see the influences of other games. Some people treat that like there's something contemptible about it, like oh, this game is ripping off God of War. Oh, look, it took that from Prince of Persia. Like there's something wrong with that. But I mean, combining the two of them, for one thing, is an innovation of its own. And then just I don't think that you need to have every part of your game be fully unique for your game to be valuable and innovative. I love God of War and I love Prince of Persia and I want more of that experience, and I'm not going to get it easily. I mean, the new God of War game was amazing. I'm really looking forward to Ragnarok. But was that what it was called? Was it Ragnarok? No, or am I just thinking of Thor? Anyway, whatever. The new God of War is going to be great. But it's very different from the earlier God of Wars. And I love those earlier God of Wars. I love Prince of Persia. And, they're doing a sort of a remaster, or more of a remake of the original Prince of Persia, the original 3D Prince of Persia, which is great. I love that too. But, I want more of that. I want new versions of it. I want new recombinations of it. As a player, that's actually really valuable to me. And so the last thing I want to do is complain or punish games for taking things I love and doing new versions of them, new approaches to them. That's great. Okay, so if I hit B next to one of these columns, my character will spin around and hit nearby enemies. Oh, and stun them specifically. Okay, so this is more valuable than just one more attack. It's actually got its own independent value in combat. That's really that's a thing that's really easy to mess up in a game, is that you get a really interesting move, like spinning around something, or this is something that, oh, whoops. I was up against a wall and I couldn't really dodge away. Ha yourself. This is a mistake that we made in, it's kind of a mistake that we made in State of Decay 2. Is the fact that, when you add an interesting move, like for instance a grappling system, we've got one of those in State of Decay 2. You add a grappling system to a game, but if the only thing, if the only outcome it has is kind of the same outcome as just normally hitting an enemy, when you grapple a zombie in State of Decay, eventually you still have to stab it in the head. The grappling system doesn't add that much. It's there's not a really strong reason why you would need to grapple an enemy in combat versus just hitting them, just shooting them in the head. If doing the normal thing is better than doing the interesting thing, no one will ever do the interesting thing. Now, there are people who have found uses for the grappling system. I know when I watch Brant Fitzgerald play State of Decay 2, he tends to, when he's fighting a group of zombies that are tightly packed together, he'll open by grabbing one zombie, throwing it at the others, knocking them all silly, and then he can sort of, do some more damage to them while they're reeling. It's pretty rare, though. I don't see a lot of people doing that tactic. It's something you have to kind of, put a lot of effort into discovering. And there's a lot of games that do that. I remember that Conan game that I referenced. I really enjoyed. It's kind of a God of War inspired Conan game. It had a lot more combat moves than I ever really found value for. And that was, I still really, really loved it. But the combat system was bigger than it needed to be. And so something I appreciate about Raji is when they're like, oh, hey, your character can swing around poles and hit enemies. They could have just said, and it does damage to them, like every other attack, in which case I would never do it. But because it stuns them, and I don't have another attack that stuns them, now when I see a pole, I'm like, ooh, here's an advantage. Here's an opportunity to do something I couldn't normally do. Kind of actually, our grapple system is not the best example of that, because there actually is, if you're an advanced player, there actually is a good reason to use it. Flying Strike that's a move in State of Decay 2 that really doesn't have a purpose. Like, you jump up in the air and you hit a zombie, and it looks cool. It doesn't do anything that a normal hit doesn't do. And so why would you ever use it? Why would you, specifically go after the skill that unlocks it? Just hit the zombie. It's not a big deal. So this is a good move in Raji, something we can learn from.
There is always a purpose to such visions.
Okay, so... Oh, they've got a cool puzzle. Okay, so controls. Okay, so I can rotate... Oh, wow. Okay, I can rotate the one I'm on. Do I need to get... Oh, I need to... Oh, wait. I need to line it up with the background. There we go. Okay, so I need to start with the outer ring and then move in. So, okay, so I can pass by the right configuration and it won't just stop me, but if I let go, then it
It is myself
recognizes
and
it.
Kolu.
And again, look how smoothly they get to that camera angle. It's not like you walk over to this spot and then push a button and it switches to the useful camera angle. It smoothly gets there. Like, I love how they've scripted the camera to move to these different positions while, like, just really in a really slick way as I'm moving around the level. Hey, purple thing.
There. Amrit Boon.
Amrit
The
Boon.
golden nectar. The fruits of a demon kill. Its power will heal your wounds.
So that was the first heal I got during the game. Okay, so I did this puzzle. Did it unlock something? Or are these just neat? Maybe this was just neat. I don't know. So Owerhammer points out, says that they love the curb stomp animation that we have in State of Decay 2. And, that is something I neglected. And that's actually one of the values of Flying Strike 2. Sometimes looking cool is enough. Like, even if the curb stomp move, is... I mean, it does have some unique value. You do kill a zombie very quickly with that move. So there is a strategic reason to use it. But it just looks really neat. And so some people will target particular moves they like just because they look really neat. But you have to make a move look really neat in order for that to be enough to get players to engage with it. Players tend to be optimizers. They tend to optimize for victory. So if you do something, that basically they will do they'll take the shortest path to victory almost every single time. So if you let them do something that is less fun but is a shorter path to victory, they'll take it even if they don't enjoy it. Even if they like another way better. If you've given them a shortcut that makes them sort of win more easily and more simply, they'll usually take that over the more fun thing. And so you have to sort of you need to try to line up the path to fun and the path to victory along the same path, or you're sort of causing players to sabotage themselves. Anyway. Okay, so if I hit A... Oh, neat. Okay, so you hit A to go up the wall, and then Y to hit everybody. Ah. All right. So again, they really made sure... Whoa, yikes. They really made sure to give each of the special environmental moves, because moves that are dependent on a certain environment are particularly dangerous to put into a game, because they're usually more difficult to pull off. Players have to be paying attention. They have to know exactly what they're doing. This was actually a problem we faced when I made this Indiana Jones. I was the lead designer on an Indiana Jones game for the PSP. And the theory we had for this game was that we wanted to have you be able to sort of grab objects off desks and tables and off the ground and just improvise weapons constantly. The problem with that was you had to really fill the world with those things in order to make them valuable. And on the PSP, we had very limited system resources, and so it was hard to actually fill the world with enough interactive objects to make it valuable, which meant players had to instead of, just having something close to hand at all times, they had to actually go out of their way to get near an interactive object in order to use it on an enemy, which meant that oftentimes they just wouldn't do it, and it made the game feel sparse and uninteresting. And that's a problem. Anytime you have sort of an environment dependent move, there's a risk that the player just won't bother with it. Because it's so hard to position themselves correctly, and so you have to really make it worthwhile. And particularly here, what they did was they had this environment-dependent move be extremely wide-reaching, which means that if it was a narrow, if the move had a narrow reach, getting into a situation where you and an enemy and the interactive location in the level are all in the same place would be very rare. But now I feel like I actually have an incentive to go and find these interactive places, because when I use them, I'll be able to hit all the enemies that aren't close to them, and the enemies that are close to them. So it's like they're really thinking about the drawbacks of each of these kinds of moves and are directly countering them with the effects of those moves. Okay, so I can... Wait, okay, so it's just showing me that I can do these moves on anything. I don't have to just do them on walls. I can do them on poles. I can do them on random objects. Okay, I didn't do that quite right. These globs are disgusting. And these creatures should feel bad for blowing their noses on me. So Owen Neffler asks, is it hard as a developer to get camera angles right? I play Division 2 and I find that the camera angle gets me killed or almost killed. So Division 2, you have manual control over that camera, right? So when you say camera angle, do you mean like when the game seizes control of the camera, and then it's possible for me as a developer to plan the camera angle badly, and there's enemies that can get you from off screen? Or when you say camera angle, do you mean like, say like the field of view, how much I can see when I'm pointing in a given direction? And so if the enemies are too widely spread out on the screen and the angle is, and that field of view angle is too narrow, then you can't see what's going on. Or like, say, if it feels really uncomfortable to aim your camera up too high, that's something that can happen a lot in like third-person shooters, is that aiming the camera up high, it's really hard to find a good place to stick the camera where you don't feel like you're just staring up the character's butthole. And so sometimes you'll end up with sort of either kind of a bad camera experience when you're aiming really high, or you'll just have they'll just limit the camera so that you can't aim high enough. And then if you get into a situation where there's a lot of verticality, you're really uncomfortable aiming at enemies and kind of get surprised by enemies that are too high for you to look at them. So yes, I would say yes, it is hard to get camera angles right. And I'm actually, one of the things I'm most impressed by with Raji here is how smooth all these camera moves are. But you can see, I mean, part of how they solved it, they didn't just solve it by being really clever with the camera. They also built their environment to be easy to shoot with the camera. They chose this fantastic, like, they're not trying to represent a realistic architecture or a realistic landscape. They designed, they came up with a whole production design for their world that is explicitly a world that is easy to shoot with a camera. And so, they have the camera pulled really far back. They built a combat system where you have really wide reach, so you're a small character on the screen with a really wide reach, and so the camera can always be pulled really far back, have these just, almost theatrical set pieces where you're just sitting back looking at a stage, and they don't have to constantly worry about, are you looking the right direction? Is the camera, narrowly focused in on the right thing? The camera is always broad, and then you end up learning to use your own focus, the focus of your brain, to sort of like dart your attention around the screen and see everything you need to see, but nothing is ever off camera. So that's a very deliberate choice that they made, so that the problem of trying to solve the camera became easier, and they could focus on just having this nice smooth sweeping camera that feels really slick all the time, and they didn't have to twist the camera out of shape to make it see things that are really hard to see. They backed it off and made sure that nothing was hard to see, and then they don't have to manipulate the camera in uncomfortable ways to solve the same problems. Okay, yeah. So yes, Owen Neffler says that yeah, the movement of the camera when I'm backing up or trying to look up was the problem. Yeah. So that is a difficult problem to solve, and especially because when the player has like right now, I don't have any control over this camera. The camera just does what it wants based on my character's movement. When the player has control over the camera and they expect to have very smooth, accurate control of the camera, like they're aiming a crosshair around, like you can't have the camera move inconsistently. You can't have it like, zoom in and out and do a bunch of crazy stuff to try to, look good all the time if you're also using it to aim your crosshair, because any inconsistency in the movement is going to screw up your aim. And so it's such a delicate, like, twisting path to walk to try to make the camera always be useful, always like be able to see around the character and make all the moves it needs to make in order to look good and have a clear point of view without manipulating it in ways that break the player's ability to control it accurately. It's a nightmare, and I'm glad it's not usually my job.
Sister's shrines are fed by violence. Raji can make use of that if she's careful.
Okay, so I do a little combat move here, and I absorb something? I'm not sure what I'm absorbing. Well, I've got something. RT?
Shri Mahakalikayai Namaha.
Oh, okay. Nice. So I did a bunch of damage and also damaged the enemies quite a bit. It's too bad they don't hit each other. I love games where enemies can hit each other and you can sort of manipulate them into damaging each other. Of course, I've been playing a ton of Into the Breach lately, so that's probably what made me think of it. Okay, so it looks like I can absorb more of this, and then use it again. And fry that dude. Oh. I appreciate that they let me hit one of the newcomers, too. Oh, yikes. Okay, so you want to focus fire on the guy you've already damaged so you can take him out of the fight. But I appreciate how forgiving this dodge is. I love games with forgiving dodges. Where when I've got invulnerability frames or whatever on the dodge, and I can interrupt any of my moves with the dodge. Like I can be, mid-attack, and then I can still pull it. Oh, actually, it looks like I can't fully... Oh, no, I can. Look at that. Oh, maybe not. Okay, I'm not actually sure what I can interrupt with a dodge. This guy seems tough. Yeah, wow, that special move is pretty devastating. I wonder, am I only ever gonna get that resource from like graffiti in the terrain, or am I actually gonna like whatever resource I was expending to launch that big massive attack?
You must admit, she shows promise.
Am I gonna get it from normal combat?
She will need battle skills. That is so true. And they will be sorely tested. But that is not what I meant when I asked if she was strong.
Alright, so what's down here?
Look here, Durga. They have captured your own story.
So Graveyard Troubadour asks, I just arrived. Is this game based off Hindu lore? I'm going by the graffiti and the creatures. Yeah, that does seem to be what this game is about. Is partly it's a cool God of War inspired brawler, but partly it's an interesting exploration of Hindu mythology. And I don't know to what degree it's based on genuine legends from that tradition, or to what degree it's a new unique story, because I'm not steeped in those traditions, so I don't really know. It's always kind of interesting to wonder about that when you play something like this.
Mahishasura, the shape-shifter This is the moment when he was granted the boon by Brahma. No man could kill him.
I am no man.
And here Mahishasura seized the heavens, unkillable, defeating and driving out all the devas, and even Indra himself.
One thing that's interesting about things that are said in Hindu culture is the fact that the naming system, in a lot of Romance languages, which is most of the foreign languages that an English speaker is typically exposed to, tend to be the Romance languages. Ending a name in A makes it a feminine sounding name, and you get really used to that as a kid. Like growing up, like any name that ends with an A, with rare exceptions, is a feminine name. But that is not true in India, and so there's lots of masculine names that end with an A, and so like growing up, I would hear a name like Shiva, for instance, and assume that must be a female deity because it ends with an A. So obviously it is, but it's not. You can hear at the beginning cutscene here, Shiva is a male god, and so it's interesting how even subtle things like that can make a difference to can matter to the way you interpret a work of art. They're just very subtle things like that. You make these assumptions in your own culture based on just what's true in that culture, and it's very easy to just sort of absorb that like it's a universal truth, because our brains are not really designed to deal with belonging to an extremely diverse society, because the human brain evolved in very small cloistered societies, single villages that distrusted every other village around them. And so the idea of just sort of assuming that everything you learn in your own culture is actually just a special case and likely to be wrong anywhere else you go, your brain isn't set up for that. It's just, it absorbs lessons from your own culture like they're universal lessons. And then learning as an adult to sort of step outside of that and realize how weird you are and how every other culture is very different in a lot of important ways. It's, depending on your personality, that's either a very distressing thing to learn and an uncomfortable thing, or a fascinating thing that just sort of captures your imagination and it makes you want to learn everything you can about other cultures. And I'm the second type, which I don't know. Sometimes I'm a little awkward about it because I'm just so fascinated that I don't know. I'll maybe talk about it a little bit too much and maybe sound ignorant because I want to talk about it so much, even though I don't know anything in a lot of these cases. But yeah, okay. What am I doing?
The Devas knew it was their only chance to create a being capable of destroying their foe.
Ah! Oh,
All
good.
their power focused into one body, gifted with all their weapons. You forced him back. I remember it well. You on a lion's back, leading the battle line. The Devas flocking behind you, inspired with new courage. Mahishasura at bay, forced to take his true form. The monstrous buffalo, stamping and blowing, crushing warriors with his hooves and throwing them into the air with his great horns.
So it's interesting to me, like, I'm assuming that this story that I'm being told is a genuine myth from Hindu lore. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, this has, this feels like that kind of thing. And the thing that's interesting to me is like this, it's there's similar stories as far as like, needing to fight a deadly, bull monster. I mean, like I remember you fight a minotaur, for instance, in Hades, and when I play Hades, there's an assumption that everyone knows this legend. Everyone knows who Hades is. Everyone knows who the Minotaur is. Everyone knows who, Sisyphus is. And they don't bother to sort of like, they just sort of take it as a given that if you're an educated person, you know what these things are, and they can just make casual references to the lives and personalities of these characters. And you'll find that, and they'll do weird things like turn Medusa into an insecure servant girl. rather than the monster that she's portrayed as in mythology. And that discordance with what you know versus what you see in the game will be funny because it surprises you. In a game like this, that is, it's set within a culture that most gamers, particularly in the United States, aren't very familiar with, they can't do the same thing. They can't just assume you know a story and then sort of, cut across that story in an interesting way and have you be fascinated by the differences. They have to actually introduce you to the story. Like, hey, okay, we're going to start at a kindergarten level and teach you the story. So I don't know if what they're doing is teaching me an original story that they came up with or filling me in on a myth that someone from India would just already know, but that I need to be brought up to understand. I don't know which of those we're dealing with here. But either way, it's interesting how different it is from, say, something like Hades. It just assumes you know a lot about the lore that it's based on.
The killing blow struck with the Trishul in your hand. There was no fear on your face, although Mahishasura had shaken the heavens themselves.
I hope you can hear these voices well enough, by the way, when I'm not talking over them.
On your brow. I knew then what the Devas had made, and I knew then what change you would bring to our world. From evil comes great good. Such is the balance of the world.
So there's a few people coming into the chat that I wanted to acknowledge here. Let's see here. Nick02 says, the background stories are actually taken from Hindu mythology. Okay, that's good to know. I don't know enough about Hindu mythology to be sure one way or the other, so I'm glad to have that confirmation that these are real stories that somebody who's familiar with Hindu mythology would probably recognize. Sengatsu says, hi, Raji is probably one of the best games I've recently played, so happy to see you play it. Yeah, so far I'm pretty pleased by what the way that they've taken a familiar genre and made a lot of, learned from it and made a lot of really good choices within that genre. Oh, okay, now I know what they want me to do. I just hit the A button twice rapidly in a row because that's what it looked like it was telling me to do. But what they're really saying is use the A button to wall run and then carefully choose when you're going to jump at the... Okay, that was a little bit late. I guess that's why they animate a character doing the thing, so that I can see how I'm supposed to do it. So let's watch the animated character. Okay, she jumps at that point. There we go.
What has happened here?
She can feel the foulness of this place.
You are surprised? Mahabalasura's demons have warped one of the holy trees of Bhumi Devi. This is why Shiva imprisoned him, to stop such corruption.
What is corruption? All things change.
Oh, yikes. Oh, weird. This guy's projectiles look really similar to some of the ones in Hades. That's kind of fascinating. Looks like this guy, okay, trying to go up this pole. It's actually kind of hard to aim at the pole. That actually illustrates a problem you have in games like this a lot, which is you've got a thing that players will sometimes want to interact with, but sometimes want to play near but not interact with. And trying to give them the option to interact with something without being forced to interact with it when they don't want to is actually really, really difficult. Okay, so this pole is here so that I can stun this guy. I'm pretty low on health here, but I only learned at the last minute what they wanted me to do was stun him because he's not very interruptible otherwise. Oh, and they refilled my health. I like, by the way, the representation of my health as these little, like, flower petals around my feet. It looks really cool. Alright, so... Oh, so this, it's like that other thing. It's like that other rotation puzzle. There we go. Okay. It's interesting. This puzzle is so different in terms of its geometry from the other one. But I immediately intuitively grasped how the controls lined up. And instead of judging it from the top down, I'm judging it from the side, but it's essentially the same kind of puzzle.
The tree showed Raji a vision of Golu, of dark clouds and a gathering storm, threatening destruction on the world.
Again, I hope you can hear the
Behind
dialogue.
it all, a being of great power and malice.
The route is open to the fortress of Jaidar. She is indeed strong, Durga.
She is. I hope she is strong enough to bear what she finds inside.
Well, I really like the way this place looks. Is this the same place, but I've sort of brought this tree back to life, or is this a different place that I've been transported to? I can't really tell, but I have been playing this game for a while. It's getting extremely late at night, and so I think this might be a good place to stop because I think you've gotten a really good sense of how this game works and what the mechanics are like, but we haven't gotten so deep into the story that we're seeing any spoilers or anything like that. So I think I will put an end to this now. But this game is really cool, and you can hear from the testimonials in the chat that there's some folks who really, really love this game all the way through. So if you're at all interested in this kind of thing, go check it out. If you've got nostalgia for the old God of War games or any other games in that genre, this is a fitting entry into that tradition. So, and it exposes you to a lot of other traditions that you don't see a lot in games. So it's valuable on a lot of levels.